Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions is a game that introduced many to the vast world of the Spider-Verse, but only introduced me to my good friends' pain and misery. Shattered Dimensions, while looking cool on the outside, is merely a facade for what's truly to come, that being a multi-dimensional mess of gameplay mechanics and optimization. Also, I recorded most of this at 720p quality without knowing. Shattered Dimensions is one of those games that you play, forget about, then come back to just to realize it wasn't as good as you remember. Shattered Dimensions takes a different approach to the story and has Mysterio be the main villain. He's trying to steal this stone before Spider-Man swings in and accidentally breaks it. This causes the stone to get shattered and lost across 4 different dimensions. Madam Web then recruits the respective Spider-Men to retrieve the pieces and restore humanity. The story isn't anything too convoluted, and it really doesn't need to be. I mean, the main selling point is playing as the different Spider-Men, and that's what was focused on. Unfortunately, that really doesn't save the game from sucking at times. Now, before I make every Spider-Man fan mad, let's all take a moment to appreciate the voice actors in this game. As Amazing, you had Neil Patrick Harris. As Noir, you had Christopher Daniel Barnes. As Ultimate, you had Josh Keaton. And as 2099, you had Dan Gilvezan. I think that's how you say his name. Now, to any normal individual, these are just random names, or the dude from How I Met Your Mother. But to any Spider-Man fan, these are the previous Spider-Man voice actors coming back to really put the Spider-Man spirit into this game with nothing short of perfection.
You can use a mint. Ugh, I can smell your breath from here.
Spider-Man!
Sadly, the trade-off for this was the gameplay. Now, before anyone in the comments starts typing, the gameplay ain't even that bad, let me explain. The gameplay in this game nearly turned me into Green Goblin himself. At first, they really win with cool tricks and combos that can be performed by the different Spider-Man, each one ever so slightly different from the last. And then you get to Act 3, and if you're anything like me, you played every level on hard, and if you're not exhausted from this game, by the time you're on Act 3, you either have the endurance of Spider-Man, or nothing to do with your life. Oh wait, playing this game on hard makes every enemy a damage sponge, and by the time you get to the later levels, they just start spamming enemies. And it's no coincidence that it's 5 times worse than the 2099 levels. These are by far the worst levels, and not just in gameplay, but I'll get to that later. It took me nearly an hour to do this stupid part where you have to protect this one dude, this singular dude, while various enemies with guns, rocket launchers, and too much health take up the entire screen. It got to the point where I had to leave and come back. And that meant I had to restart the level from the beginning, just so I'm clear. I was about to have a Joko moment. No game, no Spider-Man game needs to or should be this artificially difficult. And if anyone even begins to start typing, oh, it's just a skill issue, it's just a skill issue, I'm gonna turn into Miguel from Spider-Verse and treat you like Miles. Unfortunately, this isn't even the end of the bad gameplay. On top of the damage sponge enemies, they decided to couple it with the worst lock-on system I've ever seen. Don't ever talk shit on a lock-on system until you have played this game. The lock-on is auto-only, which means it jumps to a new enemy every 5 seconds. Now this wouldn't be such a bad problem if the Sandman level didn't exist. The enemies in this level can only be killed if you get them wet. However, if you wait too long, they turn back into sand, and you have to re-wet them. So you might be trying to kill one enemy, while the lock-on wants to shift focus to everything else but what you're trying to kill. And the worst part is, I actually like this level, but the enemies ruin it. Besides design, this level can go kick rocks, or clay for that matter. Now, after completely dogging on the gameplay, that's not to say it has no redeeming qualities. As I mentioned before, each Spider-Man plays slightly differently. Amazing is essentially the base for the rest, but doing the basic combos is still pretty fun. Noir makes you play in stealth mode, like you're Batman taking out enemies from the shadows, webbing them up and hanging them in cocoons. 2099 sucks ass, and to really smear it in, they give you this jank little slow-mo ability, as if it's gonna change anything. Ultimate is easily the best though. The combat is fast-paced, and you're dealing a lot more damage than the other versions to keep up with the overload of enemies. Unlike some Spider-Men, Ultimate also gets a cool Venom power-up that mogs on any enemy in sight. Matter of fact, if this game only had this version of Spider-Man, I wouldn't even be mad. You can also buy more moves and stuff with these spider tokens you get throughout the levels and completing challenges. There's over 100 challenges and none of them are too hard, so no complaints there. Something I do need to complain about though is the optimization. I haven't played a less optimized game since ever. Now, I'm over exaggerating a bit, but on certain levels, the game would just freeze or crash. The Deadpool level in particular did not want me to play it at all. It would crash, and then I would reload it just for it to not load in half the map. I don't know if it was just my computer or the actual game, but it gave me conniptions regardless. This level was really solid too, but I just ended up not wanting to play it or wanting it to be over because of how much it kept crashing. Now, besides all that goofy gameplay and optimization bullshit, this game still manages to be one of the coolest Spider-Man experiences to date. The level design in this game is next to none. Instead of a vast open world, Shattered Dimensions is contained within 13 levels, so the dev team really had time to flesh everything out. Well, maybe not everything. The Sandman level was one of my favorites, fighting through a sandstorm that's made up of Sandman, or the Goblin level that takes Spider-Man through a horror-filled funhouse, and allowing me to even mention or think about Resident Evil. And the Carnage level is one of the best, as Spider-Man explores the shield carrier wreckage and takeover. Unfortunately, even with this fluid-inducing game design that feels like it was ripped straight from the comic pages, they're still able to be some of the worst and most despicable levels known to man. It's like they gave up when it came to every single 2099 level. I could tell you that these 3 areas are part of the same level, and you wouldn't even know. But no, these are from the 3 different 2099 levels, and you can't even tell. And to rub salt in the wound, the 2099 levels are easily the worst, as I mentioned before. The amount of frustration and annoyance from these levels are only matched to that of Silent Hill 4. Please go watch the video. As suggested by the level names, each dimension has you fighting that dimension's villains. Kraven, Sandman, and Juggernaut for Amazing, Hammerhead, Vulture, and Goblin for Noir, Hobgoblin, Scorpion, and Doc Ock for 2099, and Electro, Deadpool, and Carnage for Ultimate. All of the bosses get a piece of the stone too, which gives them some sort of power up to get the upper hand on Spider-Man. If I had to pick my 3 favorite boss fights, it would have to be Kraven, Deadpool, and Goblin. Notice how I didn't say anything for 2099. Kraven jumps around at the speed of light while you try to attack him. Deadpool splits into 3 different versions of himself, attempting to give himself an advantage. Goblin has you lurking in the shadows of a circus tent waiting to strike. There's also these cool first person bits for most of the bosses. It's pretty much just a quick time event, so it doesn't really add much besides looking cool. Some of the bosses are pretty atrocious though. The Carnage fight throws about 1 million different enemies at you while you have to protect these mech suits. This just makes the fight more drawn out and harder than it needs to be. The Sandman level makes you throw water kegs at the Sandman heads, but due to the Roblox level lock-on system, it just ends up being more frustrating than fun. It's really unfortunate that some of the best designed levels have some of the worst bosses. Of course, the 2099 bosses don't make anything better, because why would they? The Scorpion fight is especially bad due to the random enemies they throw into the arena for no apparent reason. Hobgoblin and Doc Ock aren't the worst, but are just forgettable in my opinion. Luckily, there is one boss that's nearly flawless. One boss that arguably saves the whole game and makes all of this worth it. Mysterio, the last level of Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, and essentially one big boss fight. It's also probably my favorite level. Mysterio ends up taking Madam Web hostage and forces Peter to give him the stone. Mysterio then, I don't know, breaks reality and turns Dynaminosaurus. This level lets you swap through the 4 different Spider-Men while fighting Mysterio, each one doing something that's themed to their dimension. Personally, I think the whole game should have been like this. I mean, this is the only time we get to see all 4 Spideys interact, and this is a game about the Spider-Verse. The Mysterio boss is also probably the best simply due to the variety of gameplay. The worst part is the amazing portion, where it's just some good old enemy spam, but the Noir, Ultimate, and even the 2099 portion is pretty fun. After all of this, the Spider-Men go their separate ways, knowing the universe is saved, and being able to go back to their respective dimensions. Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions is a game you play, forget about, and then come back to just to realize it wasn't as good as you remember. You remember the great level design, but not the frustrating combat. You remember the amazing voice acting, but not the terrible 2099 levels. The combat can be fun in certain dimensions, but by the time you get to the late game, it's just repetitive, even with the new moves you can get. The bosses are mostly boring and annoying, with some good ones sprinkled throughout. The Spidey's not even interacting until the last level is also a big disappointment. While still being such a cool concept, Shattered Dimensions failed to web it all together. Well, at least I'm ready for the Madam Web movie.
With 4 different Spider-Men?
The one thing I know for sure,
Out of all of them,
I'm the best.